In the quiet suburbs of Millbrook there stood a house that whispered secrets. Some houses creak when the wind blows. Others hum with the pipes, whisper with the settling wood. But in this house, the walls didn't just make sounds. They spoke, and the words they whispered were the names of the people inside. The Callahan family thought they had found their dream home. Old, yes, but spacious and full of character. James and Melissa had scrimped and saved for years to afford it. Their children, 13-year-old Ethan and 8-year-old Lily, were ecstatic to finally have rooms of their own. Built in the 1920s, the house boasted hardwood floors and narrow hallways that spoke of a bygone era. The realtor had emphasized its quirky charm, but conveniently failed to mention the unsettling drafts that made the place groan at night. On their first evening in the new house, as cardboard boxes littered the living room floor, they heard it. Knock, knock, a faint, hollow sound emanating from within the walls. James chuckled, trying to ease the sudden tension. "Old pipes," he said with forced nonchalance. "Place is 100 years old, after all." Melissa nodded in agreement, but Ethan's brow furrowed in doubt. "That didn't sound like pipes," he muttered, his young voice tinged with unease. It was Lily who first encountered the true strangeness of their new home. Her small room, tucked away in a corner near the stairs, became the stage for a midnight performance she never asked for. At precisely 12:15 a.m., she sat bolt upright in bed, her heart racing. Knock, knock, knock. The sound came from behind her headboard, clear and deliberate. "Mom?" she whispered into the darkness, but the hallway beyond her door remained silent and still. Then came 3 more knocks, evenly spaced and purposeful. Lily, wide-eyed and trembling, found herself counting the intervals between each sound. This wasn't random, she realized with growing dread. By morning, she recounted her experience to her parents over breakfast. They smiled and offered reassurances, chalking it up to an overactive imagination and the unfamiliarity of a new house. But Ethan, ever the protective older brother, admitted with a frown that he'd heard something too, coming from his own wall. As the days passed, the knocking grew more pronounced, impossible to ignore. What began as random taps evolved into distinct patterns. Ethan, with his keen mind and passion for puzzles, started documenting the sounds. It didn't take long for him to recognize the rhythm, Morse code. The first deciphered word made his blood run cold. Lily. When he shared his discovery with his little sister, the color drained from her face. "How does it know my name?" she whispered, her voice quavering. That very night, as if in response to their growing awareness, the knocking spelled out a new message, slowly, deliberately. Ethan. By the end of their first week in the house, both James and Melissa had experienced the phenomenon firsthand. Their own names spelled out in a staccato of knocks that seemed to originate from within the very bones of the house. The family's initial excitement about their new home had curdled into a sour mix of fear and confusion. James, a practical man by nature, had finally had enough. Armed with tools and determination, he set about tearing open the drywall where the knocking was most persistent. Dust filled the air as he worked, wood splintering under his frustrated blows. But what he found behind the plaster defied explanation. There was no pipe, no faulty wiring to blame, just an empty cavity and markings that made his skin crawl. Deep scratches marred the wooden beams, forming words that sent a chill down James's spine. "Let me out. Still here." Melissa, drawn by the commotion, peered over his shoulder and immediately recoiled. Dark brown stains, long since dried, had soaked into the wood. They were old, far too old to have anything to do with their recent move. That night, as the family huddled together in uneasy sleep, the knocking returned with a vengeance. But this time it brought a new horror. A whisper, barely audible at first, slithered through the vents. "Ethan," it called, the name drawn out in a breathy, unsettling cadence. Lily's piercing scream shattered the pre-dawn silence. She'd heard her own name hissed from the darkest corner of her room. Panicked, the Callahans gathered in the living room, every light blazing in a futile attempt to ward off the encroaching darkness. Yet still, the walls knocked. Faster now, angrier. The whispers wove through every room, an unseen presence that seemed to delight in their fear. Melissa, her composure finally cracking, sobbed openly. "What do you want?" she cried out, her voice raw with desperation. The answer came swiftly, each knock deliberate and chilling. "Stay." Driven by a need to understand, to find some rational explanation for the madness engulfing them, James threw himself into researching the house's history. And there, buried in yellowed newspaper clippings and faded records, he found a clue. In 1952, another family had called this place home. Their daughter, Emily, had vanished without a trace. Neighbors had whispered dark suspicions about her father, theories of cruelty and confinement. But the police had never found a body, and the case had gone cold. The walls, it seemed, had a long memory. As midnight approached once more, the house itself seemed to come alive with malevolent energy. Knocks reverberated from every surface, a cacophony of sound that drowned out the family's terrified cries. Whispers grew to screams, overlapping and indistinguishable. The Callahans, driven by pure instinct, made a desperate bid for escape. They ran for the front door, salvation so close they could taste it. But their hope was short-lived. The doors slammed shut with impossible force, locks engaging of their own accord. Ethan shouted in defiance, his hands clamped protectively over Lily's ears. James threw himself against the unyielding wood, his fists bloodied by the effort. Melissa clutched her children close, tears streaming down her face as she murmured broken prayers. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, silence fell. The walls seemed to exhale, a collective breath held too long. And from deep within the house, a voice unlike any they'd heard before spoke with terrible clarity. "You live here now." Weeks passed before anyone thought to check on the Callahans. When police finally forced entry into the silent house, they found nothing. No signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play. It was as if the family had simply ceased to exist, leaving behind a home untouched by time or tragedy. But if you're brave enough or foolish enough to press your ear against those walls today, you might hear it. The knocks, patient, waiting for the next family to call this house their home. For the walls remember, and the walls are always hungry for new names to whisper in the dark. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed that story. If you did, please subscribe DarkWhisper AI. Leave a comment. The next episode will be up soon, don't miss. Goodbye.